so many of you know that 2 weeks ago we started a series on the Eightfold Path, which is the Buddha's fourth noble truth. And that is that there is an end to suffering, and the way to cessation of suffering is the fourth noble truth of the Eightfold Path. And sometimes when we think about the word path, for those of us that like to hike and walk, we think of a beginning point, a trailhead, a linear path, and a destination. But the Eightfold Path, as most of us know, actually is more easily understood perhaps as a wheel. And Dolly, if you can put up that wheel that we used a couple of weeks ago, that would be great. This wheel with the 8 spokes, each one a factor that supports and reinforces and is reflected in the other 7. And I think I remember from 2 weeks ago that Mary Louise compared this image to a bicycle wheel, and she said that the ending of suffering, if that indeed is our intention, then we need to engage with this wheel. We need to turn the spokes or ride the bike, as she said 2 weeks ago. And last week, when Liz spoke about the first factor, wise view, she spoke about this idea that our views can change, are subject to change, and as a result of our insights, for example, an unwholesome view can morph, as happened with Angulimala, whose views and actions changed radically in the story that she related. So tonight we're just going to continue around the spoke, moving to wise intention, which is also called right resolve, wise thought, goes by a number of names. And traditionally, wise intention and wise view are put together and considered the wisdom spokes of the wheel. So what exactly is wise intention? I've already asked you to reflect upon it earlier. And we'll start with the Buddha, the source here. When he was meditating, he understood that the thoughts that entered his mind were one of 2 natures. One category were thoughts that were those of greed or aversion or ill will or clinging and harmfulness. And he realized that there was another category of thought coming into the mind that were thoughts of harmlessness, of renunciation, of goodwill. So, wise intention, according to the Buddha, he saw how one set of those thoughts led to suffering or to non-satisfaction, and the other category led to some sense of ease, some sense of liberation or happiness. And if you think about it, you could probably consider your own thoughts, feeling states, actions, and see which one of those have led to non-satisfaction and which lead toward happiness, towards freedom. So wise intention is deliberate. It's this quality of consciously articulating what it is, what direction we wish to go, what's the set of guideposts we're using. Wise intention keeps us heading in the right direction. So for example, if I wanted to drive from Charlottesville to Washington, D.C., I'd have to keep checking to make sure the sun was setting to my left, to make sure I was still headed in the right direction. So the practice of wise intention is a little bit like checking the sun in that example. It's a way to make sure that our actions and our lives are going in the direction that we want. Emotionally, wise intention is informed by, we might call it a felt sense, a kind of trust or an intuitive seeing or value, feeling value. These words are from Anne Frank. In spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart. I simply can't build up my hopes on a foundation consisting of confusion, misery, and death. I see the world gradually being turned into a wilderness. I hear the ever-approaching thunder, which will destroy us too. I can feel the suffering of millions, and yet, if I look up into the heavens, I think that it will all come out right, that this cruelty will end, and that peace and tranquility will return again. In the meantime, I must uphold my ideals, for perhaps the time will come when I shall be able to carry them out. So wise intention has a quality like the emotional connection of inspiration, as when we're inspired by someone's courage or dedicated action or the words of a poem or a song. And a bit like music, intention can influence our mood, our thoughts, our feeling states. An example for me recently came from a book called This is Happiness. And here's the quote. He hadn't considered attaching blame because he lived outside the jurisdiction of judgment and thought everyone was doing their best. He lived outside the jurisdiction of judgment. Isn't that a wonderful phrase? What we all aspire to, living outside the jurisdiction of judgment, and thought everyone was doing their best. He hadn't considered attaching blame. So for me, those words were a beautiful way to frame blamelessness. So our intention, which can be an articulated ethic, and its felt sense of value, sets the tone of everything, of how we receive each moment of our life and whatever we do, whatever we are about to do. Within the Eightfold Path, right resolve or wise intention is often understood to consist of three types of right intention. And this again is a quote from the Buddha. And what is wise resolve or right resolve? Being resolved on renunciation, on freedom from ill will, on harmlessness. This is called right resolve. So there's the intention of renunciation, which means a resistance to the pull of craving or desire. And the intention of goodwill is the resistance to feelings of aversion, of anger, and cultivating kindness towards others. And then there's the intention of harmlessness, meaning not to think or act cruelly, violently, or aggressively, and to develop compassion. So with each of these types of wise intention, what we're really looking to do is dislodge the unwholesome thought, really to uproot it and invite a wholesome thought of letting go, of generosity, of kindness in its stead. So renunciation, the first type of wise intention, letting go of that attachment when we want things to stay the same, the good things that is, and let go of the things we don't want. We're practicing a kind of loosening, if you will, or relinquishing possessiveness. Ajahn Chah gives a story about that, and this is what he had to say. He holds up a glass. Well, this isn't a glass, but I'll use it as a demo. Do you see this glass? I love this glass. It holds water admirably. When the sun shines on it, it reflects light beautifully. When I tap it, it has a lovely ring. Yet for me, this glass is already broken. When the wind knocks it over, or my elbow knocks it off a shelf, and it falls to the ground and shatters, I say, of course, of course. When I understand that this glass is already broken, every minute with it is precious. So renunciation's not a matter of compelling ourselves to give up the things that are inwardly cherished, but of changing our perspective so that they no longer bind us. The second type of right intention is that of goodwill. And it's opposed to ill will, for example, thoughts governed by anger or aversion. And the remedy that the Buddha recommends to counteract ill will, especially if it's aimed at another person, is metta. We remember all beings desire happiness. That helps with metta. And this feeling is extended not just to others, but to ourselves as well. And the third kind of right intention is that of harmlessness. And harmlessness can be guided by compassion, the practice of compassion. The motivation is for nonviolence, a commitment to the ethic of refraining from anything that would harm another person. You might say that wise intention invites us to turn away from the grasping, from harmfulness, and open up instead to letting go, to goodwill and to compassion. And for me, I can almost sense an expansiveness that occurs as opposed to the contraction around the holding on, the clinging to. The right intention is about coming home to yourself. It's a practice of aligning with the deepest part of yourself, while also acknowledging and surrendering to the fact that we get lost in our wanting mind. And to remember also that it's your intention that affects whatever comes into your mind. So we can rely on our intuitive knowing. That's part of us as well, a felt wisdom. So whatever's manifesting in your life right now is affected by how you receive it, and how you receive it will be determined to some degree by your intention of the moment. The Buddha invited us to know this truth directly for ourselves. As with all his teachings, he said, don't take my word for it. See how it is for you in your life. Inquire, investigate. How does this work? What's my deepest intention? Am I connecting to my own sense of dignity, of kindness? And does this intention, whatever it is in the moment, where does it lead? Where is it directing us? So I thought we might take a few moments to consider intention. And I know for some, it's a regular practice. Maybe it starts from the moment you wake up, where you consider your intention for the day. Or maybe you reflect on it in the evening, how it was this day, or how it might be tomorrow.